Welcome to Talking Allergies, the podcast where we talk all things allergies about all types of allergies in all kinds of allergy lives.
From food allergies to environmental allergies, special guests, community stories, allergy and science giveaways, and more.
This is your allergy podcast for all things allergies.
Hi, Melrick.
Hi, Grace, and welcome to another episode of Talking Allergies. On this episode, we are going to be talking about wheat allergies, gluten intolerances, and celiac disease. We also have a special guest on who has his own podcast too, where he talks about celiac disease and living a gluten-free life. And it's really exciting to have him join us on Talking Allergies.
It's a really exciting episode, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the interview as well.
Wheat allergies, gluten intolerances, and celiac disease, they have some overlapping day-to-day challenges where people might go to restaurants, for example, and if they have those conditions, they might, order food in similar ways where they speak, also where they introduce themselves to different people. But if you live with either of those conditions, you actually live with quite different day-to-day challenges when it comes to the way your body deals with them, and only one of them is an allergy.
Exactly. But the overlap does actually exist because there is gluten in wheat, which is why when we're talking about allergies, intolerances, and celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition, you actually order similar food when you're going out, except there are products that can have gluten in it, and there are products that can have gluten-free wheat meals as well, which is really interesting.
So gluten-free does not mean wheat-free then?
No, it doesn't necessarily mean that either. So someone with celiac disease, gluten, and it might actually be in a whole range of different things. So it can be in wheat, rye, oats, and whereas someone that's allergic to wheat, they're allergic to the wheat. So even if the gluten is removed from the wheat, they're still allergic to the wheat.
There you go. And I guess it just reiterates that point that we talk about a lot. It's always really important to check. So if you've got a gluten intolerance, you can't have gluten. Same with celiac disease, you can't have a gluten. And you have a wheat allergy and you can't have wheat, you need to read the back of those labels, check out the manufacturers if you're not sure and so forth to make sure it actually doesn't have gluten completely or doesn't have wheat completely, but not to get it mixed up with either of them.
Exactly. So when someone says, or what is commonly said, which is a gluten allergy is commonly said, but it could either be celiac disease, a gluten intolerance, or a wheat allergy. So it's really important that you check what you have, get it diagnosed, but also ask the person what they have as well, because there's different ways of looking after them.
Definitely, I think diagnosis, speaking to that healthcare professional to understand which of those applies for you, because you may be avoiding something you don't need to avoid, or you may be putting yourself at a risk without realizing it, because all three of them have some health-related consequences. With a wheat allergy, of course, anaphylaxis is one of them, but with celiac disease and even gluten intolerances, there are some other reactions, and they can lead to be quite severe if you're not looking after yourself.
Exactly. It can be quite severe for all three of those areas as well. It just has a different reaction within the body. So a gluten intolerance may have similar symptoms to celiac disease, but doesn't actually have that same reaction in the body. So when you're going to the doctor to actually get it tested, getting it either a blood test or a biopsy test to make sure that you actually have that gluten intolerance, it's important that you actually disclose that it is that intolerance as well.
Exactly, and part of that disclosure also comes down to if you are, for example, going out to eat or you're ordering food from somewhere, you have to be very clear that it is a medical and a health condition, which is why you're asking not to have it in there. It's not a dietary preference. This is a health condition. So if you can't have wheat, it's because you're allergic. You can't have gluten, it's because you have an intolerance or celiac disease. So it is very important that they do cater for you. And it does bring challenges for people that have those conditions when they go and eat out, because if places don't cater for them, it's challenging.
Exactly. And it's so important to bring it up. So when you're actually asking for something that's gluten-free, a lot of the people now might be eating it because they feel better on gluten-free, but they may not have these conditions. So when you're asking, when you're ordering for the food, you have to say to them what condition you have, because for someone with celiac disease, the cross-contamination is a really big problem. The same with having an allergy or because you could have anaphylaxis or other allergic reactions to it. But actually telling them and showing them, say, like an allergy card or a celiac card and saying these are what you need to do to prepare for me is really important.
Yeah, and look, it can be hard to communicate. And we know from talking about allergies a lot of the time, it is a challenging thing for people that have these conditions to speak up for them. So if you are on the other side of it, if you're a food venue, if you're a person that looks after people, maybe you're in a workplace and so forth, and someone does come up to you and they say they can't have it, and you find out it's one of these conditions, that's already a brave, courageous step for them to actually say it in the first place. So if they do say that to you, take them a bit seriously, ask them a little bit more about how you can support them, but don't go back to them and doubt them and tell them that this isn't something that you believe is the case. If they're coming to you and telling you that it exists, they do that for a very specific reason, and that is to prevent them from having a negative outcome, a negative health outcome, and in some cases it can be really, really severe. So just really listen to them and support them.
It's really important when we're talking about celiac disease, because celiac disease is actually an autoimmune condition where the immune system reacts abnormally to gluten, which results in the small intestine damage due to the protein gliadin found in food made from wheat, barley, rye, and oats. So all of those can contain gluten if you look on the back of the pack. So if untreated, celiac disease damages the villi in the small intestine, resulting in the villi being inflamed or flattened.
That's right, Grace. And, with that, people with celiac disease have to lead a very strict diet throughout their lives to stay out of risk and out of harm for themselves. And a gluten-free diet is usually one of the things they follow to allow themselves to do that, which of course can overlap with people that have gluten intolerances, which are quite different too, but they would also follow gluten-free diets.
So a gluten intolerance is actually a non-immune related reaction to gluten. It's also commonly referred to as a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it can look similar to celiac disease with some symptoms looking similar, but it actually depends on when you're getting diagnosed with celiac disease or gluten intolerance or a wheat allergy. But you can actually be allergic and have celiac disease.
That's right, Grace. And, we have talked about wheat allergies in the past, and wheat allergies are a top 10 most common food allergy in Australia. And that is an immune-related response that can lead to severe symptoms such as anaphylaxis. And like celiac disease and like gluten intolerances, wheat allergies require some day-to-day management, whether you're a young person, a child, being looked after by your parents or a guardian or a carer, or you're an older person where you're independent, you're looking after yourself. You do have to make sure you avoid that. You don't want to come in cross contact with it, and in whichever way to prevent yourself from being at risk.
And if you think or feel that you have a wheat allergy, a gluten intolerance, or celiac disease, it's really important to actually go see a qualified healthcare provider, as the testing options are different.
They are. But, if you're also looking to a place to start, just go to your GP as a starting point. Maybe they'll get you those referrals and get on that journey to help you out. And if you're looking for supports, if you are living with those conditions, there are a lot of organisations, including Allergy Health Australia, that do things like support groups and have a lot of people out there. A gluten-free podcast, which we'll talk about in a second. I've name dropped already. But there are some great sort of, not just organisations, but there are also like people out there that are doing a lot of great things to bring the community together. And what we've learned through all these conversations we have about allergies and intolerances and autoimmune conditions is that there's a great, amazing community out there.
You were just talking about getting people together. Now, that goes perfectly into your interview as well. Could you talk a little bit about that, Malik?
Yeah, Grace, I caught up with Ben from a gluten-free podcast where he has his own podcast, sharing all things gluten-free and talking about his own journey with celiac disease, but also meeting many amazing people in his own community. Ben shares a story with celiac disease and also talks about those lifestyle and day-to-day impacts that living with these conditions have on people, and how, there is a big community out there, but also what you can do to help yourself. It's a really, really insightful interview. I learned a lot about celiac disease, and I hope you enjoy it.
Let's listen in.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for joining us on Talking Allergies. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, bro, Merrick. Yeah, we've been chatting for a little bit now, and it was great to meet you at the Free From Festival there at in Sydney. So yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Ben, we'll get right into it. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Ben Hampton. I'm a celiac disease advocate and podcaster, and do a lot in the celiac disease space. And I live with celiac disease. Got a gluten-free podcast, so chatted about it a lot. And got an Instagram account where I do a lot of chatting to international people and just everyone around the world about celiac disease and the gluten-free diets and all different dimensions and aspects of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Ben, when did you first learn about your celiac disease, and how old were you when it first happened?
Yeah, so it was back in 2020, at the end of 2020, and it was a pretty long road to diagnosis, to be honest, and one that just sort of happened, but kind of just by chance. So I had horrible symptoms like the whole way through 2020. Actually thought it was COVID, this thing going around called COVID at the beginning of 2020. But yeah, it was hard to get in with a GP, but I caught a gastro bug. Our whole family caught a gastro bug. And my wife and my 1-year-old daughter recovered pretty quickly at the time. But I just kept on having these lingering effects. So, symptoms such as like lots of GI issues, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, all that sort of thing. And getting really bad abdominal pains as well, just randomly, and couldn't pinpoint it down to really anything. And started, losing weight. That was the sort of the nail in the coffin. I was putting up with these symptoms for a couple of months and then started dropping weight. And I actually lost around 10 kilos from the start of 2020 to the end when I was actually diagnosed. So I basically was just going back and forth to the GP, asking all these questions. They sent me for like CTs, MRIs, ultrasounds, blood tests, constantly going back and forth. Nothing showed up except for really slight markers on the liver, which can be indicative of celiac disease, I now know. But they said, you've had all these gastro bugs. It's probably to do with that. And then eventually just found out because a friend was diagnosed the year before in 2019 and said, ask for celiac disease. Put that on the blood test, came back through the roof. Like they were literally off the charts. They couldn't read the antibody levels. So went on a gluten challenge. And if anybody listening is going through that process right now, I'm sorry. It's horrible. But the one thing I would say is don't go gluten-free before testing for celiac disease, because I did that and I was in a world of pain trying to go through the gluten challenge, and then having the gastroscopy to fully diagnose it. But eventually did that and had the diagnosis.
When you say don't go gluten-free, is that because it puts your body in more strain during the process, or?
So unfortunately the only method to, like, the gold standard of being diagnosed with celiac disease these days is to have a gluten challenge. So if you have gone gluten-free before testing for celiac, you won't get the correct antibody level readings, and that won't unfortunately diagnose you with celiac disease. You may have a false reading. So you have to be actively eating gluten, quite a large amount of gluten, to be able to have that antibody level registered as correct. So I went gluten-free and my symptoms were improving, and then I found out I had to go back on gluten to have that official diagnosis.
And it's really great that you had a friend that also sort of went, hey, maybe look out for celiac disease. Is that something that you think helped you with your diagnosis, or would you have found out that you had celiac disease even without your friend's support?
I don't think so. I have no idea. I've often wondered that, where I would be, without my friends, suggesting it. But it's unfortunately just one of those things that GPs, sometimes they do test for it, sometimes they're on board, but a lot of the time it's just not known, and there isn't enough awareness around testing for it. They do test, and they, GPs have so many, and all health professionals have so much of a big job around testing for heaps of various things. It could be anything. And celiac disease is just one of those things that they need to test for. So not at all blaming them, but at the same time, there's still such a lack of awareness out there. And hopefully it's, just put forward into more of the conversation, because there's between 200 to 300 symptoms of celiac disease. And 1 in 70 people in Australia are estimated to have it, but 80% of them are undiagnosed. So pretty mind-blowing figures. Yeah, hence why I'm trying to spread as much awareness about it as possible.
Definitely. I mean, look, it's the more awareness and the more we talk about it. And when it comes to going to a healthcare professional, whether they're a GP or someone else, you're right, there are a lot of different medical conditions that they are dealing with, from allergies, intolerances, autoimmune conditions, and navigating through it. So the more we talk about it, the more they can ask those questions as well. So hopefully there are a few GPs watching this podcast and listening in, so they can listen to your own experiences as well. Now, Ben, how did that change your life from being diagnosed? Like, how do you manage day-to-day conditions and situations now? Are there certain activities that you find challenging, especially with your family?
Yeah. The short answer is absolutely. Yeah. I never thought I would, like, ironically, I used to mock people who were on, like specific diets in the past, like fad diets. And I guess celiac disease, ironically, is sort of part of that. Unfortunately, it like sort of, picked up a bit of a cult following, and then became like a fad diet back when, like the Kardashians were around. And, but yeah, I think it's just changed a lot of like spontaneity, being able to go out and just at the drop of a hat, just book a holiday, or just, go out somewhere for the night and just be like, we're just going to eat there, or we're going to get takeaway from here. Now it's like, there's a lot more research involved. I need to ask a lot more questions around cross-contamination. And, I do a lot more cooking and baking at home. I would say that's one of the massive, positives to come out of it, and to learn more about food and its relationship to, our bodies, and what's, good for us and bad for us. It's a like pretty specific and, individual term, I guess, to use. But, in relation to celiac disease and the gluten-free diet, like I've like researched so much into food and how it can change us, and, looking at all aspects of overall health. That's been a big positive change. But yeah, it has changed a lot, like socially. Friends are on board now, but at the beginning they were kind of like not really knowing how to sort of, eat with me, and like, suggesting places to go, and they were like feeling a bit awkward around it. So it's had an impact there. And then just watching sort of everybody change, and, my immediate circle and, friends and family, coming on board and trying to educate themselves and understand it too. And I guess I'm sure you felt like this as well. Like, you feel like a bit of a burden sometimes. Just, it's not our fault, but at the same time, you feel like you're putting people in an imposition. But at the same time, it's, you got to do it for your own health. And I'm sort of, much more, open to that now, like just having to advocate for myself and be open with it, because if you don't, then, the situations aren't great. So
yeah, definitely advocating for yourself, and because you might find yourself in situations where you are by yourself. You might not have the support around you, especially if you maybe a younger person with celiac disease, a kid, teenager, just speaking up and sort of going, hey, can I eat that? Will I be safe with that? And those things that you mentioned before as well, Ben, things like, making food at home, really checking ahead. You can't just sort of go, hey, let's go out right now. You've got to check ahead and plan ahead to make sure where you're going is safe. That does overlap with people that have intolerances and allergies, so celiac disease. And we will talk about this later, of course, wheat allergies and gluten intolerances and so forth. Those little actions, those steps that you take, it is something that is done quite a lot by people that they go through these conditions, because it's important, because you don't want to go through those risks, because sometimes they are life-threatening. And it's if you can avoid it in any way, even if it is an awkward conversation, but they're conversations you have to have, which is, it's great that you're doing that. And I think by you showing other people maybe similar to you, men, males, people out there, whoever might be sort of hesitant in doing so, talk up, speak for yourself, advocate for yourself. Really, really good points. Now, Ben, does your family as well have other conditions that you manage together?
So I've been chatting to you about this personally, actually, via email. But our daughter was recently just tested for different allergies. like all the major food allergens and environmental allergens, and nothing really came up. So we're still actively on that journey of like trying to find out where her eczema is coming from. But apart from that, she does have one of the genes which could potentially expose her to activating celiac disease in the future. So we're literally just sort of looking into that at the moment. She's only only young still, and just started kindy, so we're just looking out for like all the symptoms and possible triggers that could activate that in the future. And we're very well aware of that now, from my own journey. But apart from that, interestingly, my wife is actually now mostly gluten-free, just because we have been cooking a lot at home, and she finds that she still does eat like a little bit of gluten, but when she goes out and has like a big bowl of pasta and maybe like a few slices of bread, she will react now. And I guess that's just a tolerance level, and she's just found that being mostly gluten-free, she just feels a little bit better. But that she has been tested for celiac disease, so we did rule that out. So yeah, apart from myself and potentially just looking into our daughter's allergies, that's pretty much what we deal with at home.
Thank you for talking about what was going on with your own family, and I guess living and sharing spaces as well. You sort of all end up having some of the same diets together, which makes sense.
I will just say as well, like we made the decision to like go pretty much 100%, not 100%, like pretty much like 90% gluten-free at home. We still do have, gluten containing stuff in some of the pantry. And that was pretty much a discussion my wife and I had during COVID, because I started to cook and bake a lot more, and she was as well. And I am the clumsiest guy at like the best of times. So I am just someone who would like grab something off the bench when it's like, half eaten. I'll just be like, sleepy and going around just eating bits and pieces. And I would like 100% gluten myself so much. And when I get gluten, like I'm out of it for like a week and a half. I'm just like, I can't operate, can't work, brain fog, GI symptoms, the work. So it's like, we just talked about, the risks versus the rewards with it. And we do know that we need to keep, our daughters eating gluten at home, so that, as we are talking about before, so they will be properly tested in the future. But at the same time at home, we just pretty much keep it, mostly gluten-free, just so don't get gluten. Yeah,
no, that's fair enough. And look, there's some really great gluten-free products out there, gluten-free flour options and alternatives. You make some quite tasty stuff at home. So
for sure.
Don't have a gluten intolerance myself, but I have dabbled in cooking gluten-free, wheat-free food, and come up with some really good tasty things.
100%. Oh, there's some great alternatives these days, and there's pretty much an alternative for everything. Some probably not as close as others, but there's tons of alternatives.
Now, we did touch on this slightly earlier about gluten intolerances, celiac disease, and wheat allergies. From your experiences, Ben, have you seen an overlap in the day-to-day challenges and experiences people that have gluten intolerances, wheat allergies, and celiac disease?
Yes, I actually speak to a lot of people who live with sort of both hand in hand. So you'll often find that people with those inflammatory markers and, the antibody levels, they will have, certain types of allergies. They might be, dairy, or wheat comes up a lot. So allergies of wheat. And unfortunately, I see this a lot as well, that, and I'm sure you found it on your end as well, that someone will get misdiagnosed as having an allergy when in fact they do have celiac disease. And I've spoken to people with it the other way around as well. I suppose like we were talking about this at that the Free From an Allergy show, that it's super important for health professionals to be on board both ways, to be testing for those allergies while they're still in that process of diagnosis, so they know that they have the right testing and the right protocols to move on with their life, and they have those diagnoses. Because I believe that I have some allergies myself. I'm pretty sure I do, and I should probably go and get tested But I know that it is quite a long process to have allergy testing and to get all the correct testing and to know who to speak to and all the right, health professionals along the way. But I've definitely seen a correlation between people with celiac disease, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and other allergies alongside that. They often, unfortunately, go hand in hand.
They do go hand in hand, and you're right. In terms of people that have wheat allergy, sometimes can be diagnosed with celiac disease, and the other way around too, which is important to keep on asking those questions, and also listening to yourself and your own body. You know yourself the best, so if you have that, you have a thought and a feeling that maybe you should ask further look into it, then do so. But in terms of the overlap, it's also a benefit to understand that there is a bigger community out there that might be going through the same day-to-day challenges with finding places to eat, finding products to purchase, because you have to avoid the same types of foods. So you're not alone, I guess, in all these challenges. It's great that we're talking allergies, celiac disease, and gluten tolerances, and we should keep these conversations going, basically. Now, Ben, how do you find eating when you go out with celiac disease and being gluten-free? How does eating go for you to restaurants and cafes?
Yeah, it's it's getting a bit better now. Like now I'm comfortable with advocating for myself, and as we were talking about before, just being comfortable to ask all those questions and really push and advocate for yourself, because the knowledge isn't always there. And I've had enough experience asking those questions constantly, to cafes and restaurants. And I can you get this I'm sure you have this as well. You get this sort of sixth sense when you walk in there and you're sort of asking, your script, what sort of food are you making here? Where is it being, prepared, and is there a separate fryer, and are you keeping the gluten food away from the gluten containing food, and the gluten away from the gluten-free food? And you ask all those questions and you can sort of see straight away. I often just say when I'm dining out now, just for ease, I have celiac disease, and I basically just wait for a reaction. If they know, they say, oh, these are our gluten-free protocols, we have a separate fryer, blah, 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 then I'm sort of comfortable. I'm like, okay, cool, we can work with this. But if they're sort of blank-faced, they don't really know what's happening, sometimes ask for someone else to give me a hand, but often I just won't particularly bother, to be honest, because if they don't even know the term celiac disease and what that is, that's not a great start. Even from, a young staff member, because I think the training should go across the board, because often there's a miscommunication between the lines of, wait staff, and then that going to the kitchen, and then that kitchen, the communication coming back to the wait staff, and the food being served. And there's a whole process with it. But yeah, I think just that initially was just one of the things I decided, and it was one of the best decisions I think I made, just saying, from the outset, I have celiac disease. So what can you, make safe, basically? How can we, make a safe dish? And yeah, I've had a lot more success with that versus just sort of going, I'm gluten free. What can you make? Because still so often I think that there is that stigma and that fad diet mentality of, oh, you're gluten free. It's sort of like a lifestyle choice, and it is treated like that a lot of the time. But if you say that you have celiac disease, or you say that you have this condition, it's given a lot more severity, I think. And so I found a lot more success with doing that, versus just saying just gluten free.
No, definitely. I mean, you want people to understand that you're not bringing this up because you want it. It's a preference. It's not a preference. It's a health condition, and there are serious reactions and serious negative outcomes that can happen if you do consume this. So, but you're right. The unfortunate parts of terms like gluten-free, which became marketing terms a little while ago. I think you mentioned the Kardashians earlier.
Yeah.
So, but it's good that, the awareness has come out that there are more restaurants out there that are incorporating it. But at the same time, if they're not aware of what it actually means, and if they're not communicating that to the kitchen, and the kitchen itself doesn't have it set up so they can actually make food or prepare food in a safe manner, then you would know. you've got that, I guess you've got the gut feeling that maybe this is not the right place for you. You just, I guess you say no and you go somewhere else or don't eat at all.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes that is just like the best option. And I would say to people as well, because I felt really bad doing that back in the day, but to be honest, like it's your own health, and you got to take that, as priority. So if someone doesn't understand that, or they're just ignorant about it, there's two sides to it. I think if they're happy to get on board and just, and to listen to you and take that to the chef, and they want to find out a bit more, they want to take care of you, you can see that, and they're curious, then that's one thing. But if they're just sort of like blank faced, come on, let's just order, what do you need? And rushing you, yeah, that's not going to end up in a great experience. And I've been there a few times, and I often just have learned by trial and error to just, get out of those situations as quickly as possible. And yeah, there are so many places that understand celiac disease now. It is becoming a lot more well known, and but I think that there's still a very long way to go with that, because I think, like people can have gluten-free food in a restaurant or a cafe, but often they're putting that amongst, they're putting gluten-containing bread in the same gluten-free toaster, or they've got like fries, gluten-free fries, because they just chopped up potatoes and they put, a bit of coating on them, and it's all gluten-free, but they pop it in a fryer, which is, it has gluten-containing food in there. And so there's going to be cross-contamination there. So just that level of understanding still needs a bit more, in my opinion. But there are so many places who are doing it really well, though, too.
Definitely. And, if any venues out there listening in and tuning in, there are a lot of potential people out there that might come to your venue if you cater for them. So
that's
you can
it.
prepare it in a safe way, avoid that cross-contamination and make it a bit friendly for people that have celiac disease, intolerances, allergies. A lot more people from the community can experience and come to your venue. So
yeah, I mean, like 11% of Australians are, I think that was the last figure, are following a gluten-free diet now. I don't know the proportion of them who have celiac disease, because I'm sure many of them went gluten-free before testing for celiac. But I mean, 11% of the Australian population. And as I'm sure if you find a safe place to eat, someone who's going to look after you, you will come back and you will invite all your friends who, have that particular allergy or that intolerance or that, autoimmune disease that you are required to be on this strict gluten, whatever diet. You will come back and you'll tell your community about it. And that's like, it's such a loyal community that wants to get around those cafes and restaurants that really do it well. Yeah.
No, fantastic. Now, you previously mentioned that you baked and cooked a bit more during COVID, and you still do. So part of that is, of course, buying these products. How do you find shopping and buying products that are safe for you to eat?
Yeah. I think a misconception is that, like, people on a gluten-free diet, like, we don't have like that much like of a choice, but there's such a huge broad range of gluten-free choices now, products out there now, and huge brands are getting on board with releasing products that you never thought would happen, like even like 5 or 10 years ago. You just didn't think that there would be enough of a market there to be able to produce something like that, but they have dedicated facilities for those things now, so you can pretty much get a gluten-free substitute for everything these days. And also, like, a lot of products are just naturally gluten-free. So your fruit and veg, your rice and your meat and, most dairy products, in like basically their natural form, they all are gluten-free. So you can make a whole heap of amazing gluten-free dishes that taste, just as good as, the gluten counterparts. So yeah, it's basically just been sort of through trial and error. I found some really, great recipes and products that we rely on, and some go-to recipes, which, I mean, freaking out, like, if my 2.5 and 5-year-old are liking these dishes, then I think that's the ultimate test, getting toddlers and, a 5-year-old on board with food. If they're eating it, like my wife and I always say, like, if it's one thing, if we like it, with our palates as, 30-odd-year-olds, but like if they're liking it, then I think, we often tell, the chefs or the cookbook authors, that was the test and they said they liked it. So tick of approval.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's the biggest endorsement if the kids like your cooking.
Exactly.
So makes it easier in the future.
For sure.
Now, with all that, Ben, are there situations that you still avoid these days?
Yeah. There's a fair few. Or just, certain situations where I think twice about it as well. And there's just things that you would not even think about. I'm sure that you've thought about them, with your own allergy journey, and things that you have to be so careful around in your own life. But like even just going, I'm not a drinker anymore. I've pretty much just had, my drinking period in the past. I think I've drunk enough alcohol in my life, for a lifetime. But just, going to a pub, even like I went to a pub the other night and just got a couple of drinks with my wife, and even just, the foam from the beers sitting on there, like they contain barley. So if that got poured into my drink, any of that, like that would, probably give me symptoms, probably gluten me. It's like, and those drinks were just sitting there on, on the counter, and I just got some, lemon lime bitters or whatever it was. And there's just, like that entered my brain. And so it's that sort of change that I never thought I would experience, like having this anxiety around food, like just something that, we consume and that I took for granted for so long. That relationship has just always changed now. And I think there's some sort of, psychological work which isn't spoken about enough. That anxiety around, your changing relationship with food. If you get an allergy, or if, you're diagnosed later on in life or as a teenager or at any age, it changes the way you operate day to day. And I don't think that that's spoken about enough, the mental health aspects of that. It's often just the physical aspects that are talked about, but I try to cover that in my show as much as possible with guests, like, just how things have changed in their life since their diagnosis and going gluten-free, because it's those little things that you don't even think about. And they can have a profound impact. So it's changed a lot of things, in my life. Probably I couldn't list them all right now because it would probably go on for another hour or so, but, it's changed little things day to day that I never thought it would. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for the diagnosis, because the place I was in pre-diagnosis was shocking and I could not have operated any longer, just going the way I was going. And so I was so grateful to our friend for, suggesting it, asked for a celiac disease test. And it is just a simple blood test. And just so grateful I had that, because I honestly, as I said, I don't know where I would have ended up without it. So
no, of course. And look, shout out to your friend, for that. So always good to have good mates out there that support you. And but you're 100% right about it. The mental health aspect, even with allergies, allergy anxiety when it comes to food, and not just what happens after a reaction, but even leading up to you being in a situation. You mentioned going to a bar, with food, things like buffets, going into parties. You might even go on an airplane and a flight, and places where there's a lot of shared food or shared drinks, that you could be at a risk. And beer is a really good example for gluten-free, even wheat. It does have it on there. There are gluten-free and wheat-free beers out there, but you're not going to find that in your general pub in every suburb. You've got to really find those places that actually stock them, and you might still have that cross-contamination bit, which from your perspective puts yourself at a risk. So you may want to avoid that. So I completely understand. It is something that we hear from a lot of people that have allergies as well, avoiding situations completely, finding a safe way to do it. So you might actually, if you wanted to, find that alternative and just have it at home or in a controlled environment at a party that is safe to do so.
100%. And the quality of, your life as well, that's impacted because of that. But finding those groups as well, I think is super powerful that you touched on there. Like and that's like something that I have, actively been trying to just, really create a community around, just with the podcast and with the Instagram page, and just, bring people together and just, like just talking about this sort of stuff. Like it's not often that you get to sit down and talk to people about these kind of things, like your journey and a diagnosis and what that means for you. And, you know, being able to sit down with someone and have like a safe meal, and then for them to understand, you know, what you're going through is super powerful. And yeah, so if you can find your community around you, I've found the gluten-free community, and it's been like honestly so life-changing and helpful for me. And I just want to continue to you know, help people get together and create more of a community around us, because you just don't, like, it sucks being, you know, feeling like you're being left out, or like you're just different, because there is no reason for that, because so many people are going through similar situations. So
yeah, it's not something you can control. You know, it's your life. You've got to live with it, but you can find ways to do things safely and with other people there around you as well. Now, Ben, you have mentioned this previously, just before, and I mentioned it as well before, but tell us about this famous social media channel that you've got, your podcast, and also that you're doing catch-up groups now, which sounds fantastic. So tell us all about it. I think it's time we uncover the whole Ben.
Oh, thanks, man. I wouldn't call it famous, but no, it's been awesome to just like connect. As I said, like during COVID, I wasn't able to get out and really connect with anybody or go to any, you know, gluten-free meetups or anything like that. So I was basically doing everything online. Hence why I started the Instagram page and just sort of started to chat to people all over the world and within Australia, obviously too. And that just sort of, yeah, just grew. And I decided to start a podcast to talk about all these, you know, stories that I was collecting from these people and chatting to them and hearing the differences, but also commonalities of things that people were going through. And I've been doing that for a few years now. And I like have spoken to so many people in various businesses and from, you know, cookbook authors and like just experts in their field in the medical profession, and, you know, people starting things up and just seeing where sort of a lack in the community has, you know, been. And it's basically just people just wanting to get together at safe places and have a chat about this sort of stuff and eat some good gluten-free food. So I was like, all right, let's just, you know, do that. Let's find these places that are doing it well, get together, have a freaking awesome time, and just chat about what we're going through. Because I think, you know, it is one thing to chat to people online and be on social media, which is a beast in itself, and can have good and bad, you know, connotations to it. But you know, but it's another thing to actually meet people and connect with them and make friends and find these safe places to eat and share, like, oh, I ate at a safe place here, you should go there. Or, you know, I found this cool product, you should check that out too. And like, just to basically just create this network around you. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So basically facilitated that by starting a gluten-free evening. So it's a chance for people to just, yeah, in the gluten-free community to come together and to check out safe venues and to celebrate those venues that are doing it, you know, doing gluten-free really well and safe and know their stuff. And invite, yeah, people to get together and chat and share stories. And yeah, and we've worked with a lot of brands as well to have them on board to put together some goodie bags. And so people take away goodie bags from the night as well. And I get up and have a chat, and then the owner gets up and has a chat from the cafe or restaurant. And it's just an awesome time. Like, it was so good to do our launch just back in February. Like, clearly people just want to get together. And just chat about this sort of stuff and meet each other and to know that, like, they're not alone going through this. So yeah, it's been awesome, and I can't wait to just see where it goes.
No, that sounds absolutely wonderful. But you are famous, Ben.
No,
you're doing some amazing things out there. So it's awesome. It's great to see this awareness and just the coming together of the community, but people meeting in person as well and safely doing so, just having a bit of fun, because, you know, we can't look at life as what we can't do, but also look at what we can do with whatever we've got living with conditions, allergies, intolerances, and autoimmune conditions. What is the name of your channel for people that want to follow you on social media, Ben, and also the name of the catch-up groups as well for people that want to join?
Yeah, for sure. So we're a gluten-free family on Instagram, and we could only get the tag 𝘥𝘪𝘴𝘭𝘭𝘦𝘺 family. I tried to get a gluten-free family, but it didn't work. So yeah, we're 𝘥𝘪𝘴𝘭𝑚 family on Instagram. And that's pretty much where I share all this stuff. So about a gluten-free evening, that's the events that we hold. And yeah, also host a gluten-free podcast. It's literally called a gluten-free podcast. I just thought I'd make the name easy. So people are searching for like, what's a gluten, is there a gluten-free podcast? And I just, I thought I'd just name it that. That was all I could come up with. So yeah, those are the ways you can find us and connect with us.
If the name is available, why not? And it's very straightforward, but at the same time effective name for people who want to learn all about the great things that you've been talking about. Now, Ben, if you were to meet someone at the start of their celiac disease journey, is there anything you would say to them?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd probably just listen, because that's probably something that people haven't done for them. And that's what I felt like when I was at the start of my, a lot through the whole process of my journey, that I didn't feel listened to. And I speak to so many who go through, such a horrible time in that, medical process of not being listened to by their doctor, not being listened to by various health professionals, feeling rushed and just not feeling like they're completely listened to. And when you're in that state of, the brain fog that you experience often with celiac disease, and you're in these gut pains and you're having all these horrible symptoms, it's so hard to articulate what you're going through at the best of times. So I would probably just sit down and listen to them, to be honest. That's something that I've learned through doing my podcast. It's super powerful just to be able to sit down and listen to someone. And often that's what's missing for them. But yeah, otherwise, just take it one step at a time. It's a big journey, celiac disease, and getting diagnosed, and you think it's often the end of the road, but it's just, honestly, it sounds cliche, but it is just the start of a much better, start for you. And to look at it that way, because once you go gluten-free, I know for myself, like within a couple of days, I was just an absolutely new person. The fog was just lifted, and I just felt like, oh, okay. Oh, is this the way that I should be feeling? Like, wow, this is all right. this isn't too bad. But just giving that time as well, because it takes a while to heal, depending on what age and how much damage you've done to your gut pre-diagnosis. So just take your time, research as much as possible, and just, as helpful as they can be, they can also be dangerous. Hop online and just connect with people, and like Facebook groups, and, do your own research, catch up with people, learn from their experiences. And yeah, it may seem like a huge life-changing experience, because it is, but at the same time, you'll be okay and you're going to figure it out. Just surround yourself with people who want to learn more, who are curious, and you'll be all right.
That's wonderful advice, Ben. And you're right. Listen and do your research, and also find that support from others out there. There's a great community out there. You're not alone. Definitely not with celiac disease, but also there's people that have allergies and intolerances as an extended community, all sort of looking through the same things. And if you're looking for food, for example, you might be all searching the same things online, probably Googling the same things.
Yeah, true.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Allergies. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about all things celiac disease and gluten-free. We will share some details about your pages for people to follow on social media and so forth. But before we conclude our interview, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Mate, I would just love to have you on my podcast at some stage, and just to share more about allergies, and just to chat about that a bit more, because I know a lot of people who listen to the show have allergies, and or perhaps may have an allergy and not even know it. So personally interested as well. I probably will do a bit more testing in the future with our daughters and for myself, but I know I speak to so many people who are very interested in this space, and allergies are just, as I'm sure you're aware, they're just going through the roof. And so many more are living out there with allergies. So that's one thing I would like to add. I would like to have you on the pod at some point.
No, definitely. One of us will have to join you on your amazing podcast, a gluten-free podcast. So, well, thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch up soon. But thank you for joining us on Talking Allergies.
Thanks for having me, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ben, for talking all about your celiac disease and gluten-free journey. It was actually really informative and really lovely to hear their perspective as well with living with celiac disease, but also fantastic looking at their social media. I've been following them for a while.
Thank you for coming on, Ben. Really appreciated having you join us, and we'll definitely have to bring you on in the future and maybe even join you on your podcast at some point.
Exactly. To find Ben, look at A Gluten-Free Family on Instagram or A Gluten-Free Podcast when you find your podcasts.
And of course, we'll drop the links to Ben's gluten-free podcast wherever you find your podcast.
It was really interesting hearing about Ben's experience about finding out that he actually had symptoms and going to the doctor and getting tested and finding out about diagnosis. It does have a lot of similarities between allergies as well, finding out from a doctor going, oh, actually I've just got these symptoms, and then having a diagnosis that you go, oh, okay, so now I've got to make changes in my life in terms of the way to actually live with it is quite similar from my experience anyway.
Yes, Grace, and look, a big shout out, and we do a lot of shout outs on this podcast, and it's important we do another one. This time for the healthcare professionals out there, the ones that help people navigate through whether it's a wheat allergy or a celiac disease diagnosis or a gluten intolerance. So to any of those healthcare professionals, the ones that are getting those people coming to meet them and helping them find out which part of their journey they need to go and help manage and jumping on that and supporting them. Thank you.
Malrick, that comes to the end of this episode.
It's the end of this episode, Grace, but of course it's not the end of Talking Allergies.
Oh, it's not? We're going to continue talking allergies.
Talking Allergies, we might even talk about intolerances and other autoimmune conditions, Grace. We talk about everything connected to the world of allergies because there's a lot to talk about.
There is.
On Talking Allergies.
On Talking Allergies.
The discussions on Talking Allergies are here to support you or your loved one on your journey with allergies. The topics discussed here are not intended as medical instruction or as a substitute for advice by a qualified healthcare